The history of the United States is interwoven with the thread of racial violence. From the horrors of slavery to the brutality of Jim Crow, black people have endured centuries of oppression. This legacy of violence did not vanish with the abolition of slavery. It morphed, taking on new forms, but remaining a constant threat. In the years following the Civil War, a system of racial terror emerged, designed to maintain white supremacy and control. This system manifested in countless acts of violence, both individual and state-sanctioned. Lynchings, race riots, and discriminatory laws were commonplace. Law enforcement, often operating as an arm of this system, terrorized black communities with impunity. These acts of violence were not isolated incidents. They were the tools used to uphold a racial hierarchy that placed black lives at the bottom. Understanding this historical context is crucial to grasping the ongoing struggle for racial justice in America. It is within this context that we must examine the tragic stories of individuals like Niecey Brown, Simon Pierce, and countless others who suffered under the weight of racial hatred and injustice. Their stories, though painful to recount, serve as stark reminders of the human cost of systemic racism. These stories demand to be told, not only to honor the memory of the victims, but also to shed light on the enduring legacy of racial violence that continues to plague the nation today. By confronting this history head-on, we can begin to dismantle the systems of oppression that have allowed such injustices to persist for far too long. Niecey Brown, a 74-year-old black woman, lived in Selma, Alabama, a city steeped in the struggle for civil rights. In 1945, Selma, like much of the South, was ruled by Jim Crow laws. Segregation was a way of life, enforced by both law and violence. Black people were relegated to second-class citizenship, denied basic rights and dignity. On a summer day in June, tragedy struck Niecey Brown's doorstep. George Booker, an off-duty white police officer, came to her home. The details remain unclear, but an altercation ensued. Booker, fueled by racial hatred and a sense of impunity, brutally beat Niecey Brown. Her injuries were severe, a testament to the brutality inflicted upon her. Niecey Brown, a woman who had lived through the hardships of segregation, became another victim of racial violence. Despite eyewitness accounts, justice was elusive. Booker was acquitted by an all-white jury, a common occurrence in cases where black lives were lost at the hands of white perpetrators. Niecey Brown's death, though seemingly lost to the annals of history, speaks volumes about the racial dynamics of the time. It underscores the vulnerability of black people, particularly black women, in a society where their lives were devalued and their voices silenced. The lack of justice for Niecey Brown is a stark reminder of the systemic racism that permeated the justice system. It exemplifies how the legal system, instead of protecting black lives, often served as a shield for white supremacy, perpetuating a cycle of violence and oppression. Her story, though tragic, is not unique. It is one of countless stories that expose the brutal reality of racial injustice in America. The story of Simon Pierce, a 15-year-old black boy living in Lexington, Kentucky in 1904, offers another chilling example of racial injustice within the legal system. Simon, like many boys his age, got into a fight with another boy. However, the color of Simon's skin dictated a far harsher consequence. The other boy involved was white, and in the racially charged South, this fact alone sealed Simon's fate. Instead of a reprimand or a fair hearing, Simon faced a justice system designed to punish black people, regardless of guilt or innocence. The judge, a white man upholding the racist ideology of the time, handed down a sentence that reflected the cruelty of the era. Simon's own mother was ordered to whip him publicly. This act, designed to humiliate and degrade, was a blatant display of power and control. It was a stark reminder of the legacy of slavery, where black bodies were subject to the whims of white authority. Forcing a mother to punish her own child in such a manner is not only cruel but also psychologically damaging. It highlights the way in which the system sought to break the spirits of black people, instilling fear and subservience. Simon Pierce's story is a disturbing example of how the legal system was used as a weapon against black people, particularly black children. It underscores the ways in which the legacy of slavery continued to permeate society, dictating the treatment of black people and denying them basic human rights and dignity. The Duluth lynchings of 1920 stand as a horrifying testament to the racial terror that gripped America during the early 20th century. Duluth, Minnesota, a city grappling with the influx of black people fleeing the Jim Crow South, seeking better opportunities, became a hotbed of racial tension. This tension, fueled by racist ideologies and economic anxieties, culminated in a horrific act of violence against 3 innocent black men, Elias Clayton, Elmer Jackson, and Isaac McGee. These young men, employed by a traveling circus, found themselves falsely accused of assaulting a white woman. The accusation, later revealed to be baseless, ignited a firestorm of racial hatred within the city. A white mob driven by bigotry and a thirst for vengeance stormed the jail where the men were held. The mob, acting with impunity, dragged the 3 men through the streets, subjecting them to unimaginable brutality. They were beaten, hanged, and their bodies left on display, a gruesome spectacle meant to terrorize the entire black community. The Duluth lynchings were not an anomaly. They were part of a larger pattern of racial violence that swept across the nation. These acts of terror, often met with silence or even complicity from law enforcement and local officials, served as a means of social control, reminding black people of their place within the racial hierarchy. The Duluth lynchings remain a scar on the conscience of America, a chilling reminder of the deadly consequences of unchecked racial prejudice and mob mentality. This event, though occurring nearly a century ago, speaks volumes about the deep-seated racism that permeated American society. It highlights the vulnerability of black lives in the face of racial prejudice, and the urgent need to confront and dismantle the systems that perpetuate such violence. Such brutality never happens again. Section 6. Echoes in the present modern manifestations. The passage of time has not erased the legacy of racial violence in America. The echoes of the past reverberate in the present, manifesting in new and disturbing ways. From the streets of Ferguson to the sidewalks of Minneapolis, the names of black men, women, and children killed by police violence ring out with tragic familiarity. Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, Eric Garner, Tamir Rice, Sandra Bland, Philando Castile, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd. These names, and countless others, have become synonymous with the ongoing fight for racial justice. They are stark reminders that while the tools of oppression may have evolved, the underlying system of racial bias and violence persists. The advent of smartphones and social media has brought the realities of police brutality into sharp focus. Videos capturing the brutal treatment of black people at the hands of law enforcement have sparked outrage and protests across the globe. These videos, often graphic and disturbing, have shattered the illusion of progress, revealing the deep-seated biases that continue to plague policing in America. The stories of modern-day victims of police violence mirror those of the past. They speak of racial profiling, excessive force, and a lack of accountability for officers who abuse their power. They highlight the urgent need for systemic change within law enforcement and the justice system as a whole. Create a more just and equitable society for all. Section 8, The Urgency of Now, a Call to Action. The fight for racial justice is not a spectator sport. It requires active participation from all who believe in equality and human dignity. Silence is not an option. It is a form of complicity. We must all use our voices and platforms to speak out against injustice, amplify the stories of those who have been marginalized, and demand accountability from those in power. This call to action is not limited to marches and protests, although those remain powerful tools for raising awareness and demanding change. It also involves engaging in difficult conversations with family and friends, challenging racist jokes and stereotypes, and educating ourselves and others about the history and ongoing realities of racial injustice. We must support organizations and initiatives working tirelessly on the front lines to combat racial inequality and advocate for policy changes. Voting in local, state, and national elections is crucial, as is holding elected officials accountable for their stances on issues of racial justice. The time for complacency is long gone. The urgency of now demands that we channel our outrage into meaningful action. By working together, we can create a future where stories like those of Niecey Brown, Simon Pierce, and countless others are not repeated. A future where Black lives are valued, protected, and given the respect and dignity they deserve. Section 9. Towards a Just Future. Hope in the Struggle. The fight for racial justice is a marathon, not a sprint. There will be setbacks and challenges along the way. However, we must never lose sight of the hope that fuels this struggle. Hope for a future where Black children can grow up without fear of being profiled, harassed, or killed because of the color of their skin. Hope for a society where Black voices are heard, valued, and respected. Hope for a nation that truly lives up to its ideals of equality and justice for all. This hope is not passive, It is an active force that compels us to continue the fight, to challenge the status quo, and to work tirelessly towards a more just and equitable future. It is fueled by the resilience and determination of generations who came before us, who fought for civil rights, for voting rights, for the right to exist with dignity and respect. As we honor their legacy, let us also draw inspiration from the young people leading the charge today. Their passion, their energy, and their unwavering commitment to justice give us hope that change is possible. By working together, across generations and across racial lines, we can create a world free from racial violence and oppression, a world where Black lives truly matter. The road ahead may be long, but we must never give up the fight. For in the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. Let us continue to bend that arc together towards a brighter and more just future for all.